Hello and a warm welcome to my YouTube station. We're trying to have a series of conversations to understand what really has changed as far as India's new normals or new templates that it has built for Pakistan. Are they going to be effective, and how are things looking really when it comes to India's trusted partners? I'm joined here by Indrani Bagchi, a former senior journalist but still a very prolific writer and CEO of Ananta Aspen India. And I would highly recommend her recent article on the ceasefire, which India says is a mutual understanding. The link is there in the description box on the station. Do read it up. Indrani, thank you so much for finding time.
Thank you, Smita.
You know, all that we are hearing is the new normal, new normal, new normal. Is it really a new normal between India and Pakistan?
Well, we've redefined the normal in various stages of our conflicted history with Pakistan, and so we are at another stage. So yes, to that extent, this is a new normal. We've had a new normal before that was relevant at that time, and this time we believe that, at least the government believes, that it is going to be the new rules of the game.
You know, but as Prime Minister Modi in his address to the nation, and then of course in a subsequent address at the Adampur airbase, mentioned that essentially we're looking at three indicators here of what he says are the new templates. That A, to every act of terror will be considered an act of war. That India will also not cave in to any sort of a nuclear blackmail that will not work, and that there will be a strong response to Pakistan. There will be no hesitation. Now, doesn't it also raise the escalation so much more that any gun-holding terrorist can come and create a state of war between two neighbors who are joined by, joined in the borders?
I think you have to take that in. I don't think a gun-holding terrorist is going to be an issue. What actually defines, when do you define terror? You also define terror in the way that, say, Mumbai happened, where it was they were terrorists who were randomly killing civilians. The same thing happened, something similar happened in Pahalgam. Pahalgam came with a separate level of barbarity and a separate level of discomfort. So you can obviously, I don't think anybody believes that one terrorist throwing a grenade is going to spark a war. Of course not. But I think what he was trying to say was that it is an act of war in the sense of there will be a proportionate response to whatever action they take. And if there is a terror activity of the kind that we saw in Pahalgam, you will see the kind of response that is a deeply military response. This is not new, I mean, in the sense of, for this government at least, because what we have seen is that since Pathankot, which was January 2015, if I remember correctly, yes. January 2016, January 2015,
and then Uri
came in October 2016. You've seen that the level of military response kept going up. First, you had a series of cross-border
surgical strikes, as they were.
Well, they struck the terror camps across the LOC, which, even if they had been done earlier, the point is this time they made a point of describing it, of coming out with it, which left no doubt that this is the route that India would take, that a proportionate response would happen. You saw something similar in the next rung went up in Balakot, and the third one for Pahalgam, because you saw a set of 9 strikes across 9 terror infrastructure in about 30 minutes. So that's how it will be. War in the a very traditional sense of armies marching against each other happens only in movies. Frankly, if you saw that 4-day war, it was completely in the air.
I agree, and in fact in my broadcasts I did mention that I'm actually calling it a war. I'm not calling it a state of war because the Pakistani drones, the swarm of drones, they were also trying to strike out at civilian residential areas, on military installations. So I don't think that there was any hesitation left to accept that we were in a war with
there is no difference of whether you are in a state of war or a war. It's the same thing. It's just an extra 2 words, frankly. But it's like Ukraine and Russia. It's the same thing. They've been, after the first assault where they took territory, it's been this. Modern wars are this. It's in the air. It's not on the ground anymore. So when you say we will describe it as an act of war, there is a whole spectrum of actions that can be taken as a response to war. It doesn't mean a 19th century or a 20th century war.
Boots on the ground all the time.
In fact, if you see the new wars, at least as I see them, frankly, infantry no longer matters.
But having said that, Indrani, I mean, in your article, you did raise a lot of questions about the timing of the ceasefire. I would like to ask you, why do you feel that New Delhi is not wanting to call it ceasefire? Why is it constantly wanting to say that this is a mutual cessation of hostilities, stopping of firing on land, air and sea, and this is not a ceasefire? And B, do those questions about the timing of the ceasefire still remain?
Well, the words matter, because if you remember, after the 7th October attacks, Israel declared war on Hamas. We haven't declared war on Pakistan. Therefore, ceasefire will only apply to either the Gaza war or the Russia war, both of which were declared wars. That's the word play
semantics
there.
And all of
that's there. The timing of the ceasefire was not my. It was how it was communicated. If the Pakistan DGMO called the Indian DGMO to say, or even if he called America to say, please tell the Indians that I want to de-escalate, that's fine. He could have done it the day before. He could have done it the day after. The fact still remains that it was the Pakistan DGMO. It was Pakistan that took that first step. I think where a lot of Indians found it a little problematic was that it wasn't announced by either India or Pakistan, either of the two principals or the two parties, but announced by the US president on the other side of the planet. And that it came about 36 hours after the vice president of the US actually went on record to say it's none of our business.
That we won't intervene beyond a point.
Exactly. To have suddenly, for that 180-degree switch, I think that was problematic. It was not the timing. I mean, war is not something that anybody wants or likes or should have. You enter into a warlike state because there are compelling imperatives, and but to be able to stop a war when one side is asking for the stoppage of hostilities is proper form. It was how it was done.
I mean, but the questions being asked is, why do it when your forces seemingly had an upper hand? Why do it when the armed forces had complete operational freedom? And this entire theory that the time is ripe now to essentially take steps towards ensuring that the line of control becomes an international border.
Why should the line of control become the international border at all? Who says that the line of control should become an international border.
Then realistically,
Nobody.
what is the other solution?
No, you're talking of solutions. Let's go back to the question, which is even if you were ahead, does that mean that you really want to decimate everything? That's not war. That's not what anybody does in a war. There are rules in a war. In a war, even in the hostilities, if one side calls you to say, that's the modern equivalent of what used to be a white flag. There is a white flag movement. When there is a white flag movement, you respond. That's the humane thing to do, because you didn't want to go into it in the first place. As for the international border, this is a fantasy that we have, that at least some people in India have lived with for the last God knows how many years. Where is the evidence that anybody wants the LOC to become the international border, except for people who sit at a conference and have no stakes in the game? There is a 1994 Parliament resolution that says very clearly that it is the job of India to bring the POK back into its territory. Please find me a government that will rescind or revoke that particular
But
parliament
that's where the
resolution.
questions are being asked, even from the followers and supporters of the BJP and Prime Minister Modi, that, is it really possible to go ahead and think that you will ever be able to get back Pakistan occupied Kashmir
I don't think
without a full-fledged war? And if
does-
that's the case, why not go in for the war at this point in time?
I think that is presuming way too much. That I think supporters of the BJP also, or supporters of anybody else, are not running the government. There is nobody from the official system. In all the 28 years that I have covered this, nobody from any official system of any government in this country has ever said, has ever proposed formally that let us make the LOC into the international border. And what will happen once you do that? Do you think terror is going to stop? The terrorists can cross over an international boundary, as we have seen them do. That is not the point. That is not even the solution.
So then that brings me to the question, do you feel that there's going to be any change in Pakistan's behavior at all when it comes to supporting cross-border terrorism?
Not at all.
Even after these strikes?
Not at all.
So what did we achieve then through Operation Sindoor?
We raised the cost. That's all. We raised the cost, and at every stage you will keep raising the cost. That was one.
It costs us also, no?
Everything costs you. Nobody should ever imagine, or can ever imagine, if you're a serious person, that an attack or hostilities don't cost us. The point is, you're willing to take that cost because you want to impose a bigger cost. That is the point. The point is not that we don't pay a cost. The point is that we impose a bigger cost. There is another point and that goes back to your first question about the nuclear blackmail business, is if you have noticed that at every stage you have expanded the space for conventional warfare or conventional hostilities. From back in the day, you couldn't touch a terror camp across the LOC because Pakistan's nuclear threshold was here. Pakistan's nuclear threshold now is at the ceiling, and that has extended. You've kept growing that nuclear threshold. That you've kept pushing the nuclear threshold back, further and further back. In 2008, we didn't strike after the Mumbai attacks because of this very same.
So there have been claims by the then NSAs and stuff that some surgical strikes did take place, they were not talked about.
That is not the point. The point is you did not strike. The Mumbai attacks were the most horrific attacks that we have had in 26/11. Although I would say that putting pressure cooker bombs in trains in 2005 and 6 that we've seen was, in my view, equally horrific. We couldn't act then. We couldn't act after. It was not because
in the Parliament attack, we had Operation Parakram waiting for
that
it
was
too.
2001. Again, we did have, at least you mobilized your troops. But what you couldn't do because of the nuclear threshold. You couldn't do that. Even Parliament attack, when you did Parakram, you couldn't cross over. You couldn't do it because of the nuclear threshold. That over the years, that nuclear threshold has been pushed further back. That is not good for the other side, but that is good for us because you've expanded that space. So look at this one. 4 days of full all-out conventional hostilities.
Yeah.
But stayed in the conventional. It was not a nuclear fear. That is another one.
But both sides stayed within the limits of international borders?
Both sides stayed within their borders. Both sides. So your technology has just moved.
Yeah.
And therefore war fighting, the future of war is very different. So, and it also, what it does is it keeps you in the... Russia, for all its nuclear weapons, has it been ever able to strike Ukraine? With a nuclear weapon, with a tactical nuke or a strategic weapon? No.
So you think the nuke blackmail still remains a deterrent, or what?
Nuclear blackmail remains there, and for Pakistan it's very important, and it will remain there.
Right.
So, you just have to learn to deal with it better.
Let me just clarify to the audience, by the way, I'm not rude that I'm having the chai alone. It's Indrani who very kindly offered me the chai and she doesn't want to have one.
I've just had my coffee.
Okay, just the last couple of questions, and before I go into the diplomatic part of it, I mean, how do you look at these reports? I know the Indian armed forces were asked about it, about the possible radioactive leakage, about India hitting nuclear installations in Kirana. And a lot of the theories were that America essentially pulled its weight and made these calls because they were worried that it had escalated to the level of a nuclear war.
Okay, first thing, a nuclear shooting off a nuclear weapon is not like shooting off a BrahMos missile. And I think we should clarify that for the sake of your viewers. It's not like let's take it out of the basement today and let's shoot it. That isn't how it works. Any movement with a nuclear weapon is detected everywhere in the world. And I will go back to an incident in 1990, which was the last time when Pakistan actually rolled out its delivery vehicles to mate the warhead with the vehicle. That was back in 1990. It is not. It's not really. And a nuclear storage depot, which everybody seems to think is like an ammunition depot, is really. It's not. The Pakistan army is a professional army.
True.
They are not going to be storing nuclear materials in such flimsy places that it allows them. The Americans have had oversight over Pakistan's nuclear arsenal forever. So this is ridiculous. Besides, Indians have said it on the record that they did not hit those
and
hits.
it was a very interesting response from Air Marshal
just by the way,
that I didn't know they had nuclear sites there.
But that also just the other thing, please remember that if there was radioactive leakage there, every bordered village in India would have felt the radioactive effects. If it doesn't stay within national borders, right? So if there was something there, the winds would have blown it here. You would have had the same symptoms among the people on this side of the border. Did you have it? No.
I think it's very, very important. Look, Indrani here is somebody who has vast amount of experience, and it's very important whether you're a civil society member, academic or journalist, to get completely drowned in this nationalist rhetoric and lose sight of what is really seen and what could happen or not happen. It's very important, particularly in times of conflict, in times of wars. So, there may be a lot of fantasy that people have about, the Talibanis have picked up nuclear installations. I mean, at the end of the day, Pakistan is a real country, as with a professional army, as Indrani mentioned, and they will also obviously take their own precautions when it comes to where they are housing their nuclear sites, how they are housing. It's not going to be easy, where satellite imagery today picks up the slightest of movements and the slightest of details in these situations. So, Indrani, in this war against terror for India, 9/11 attacks had, in a lot of ways, redefined the way the world saw the war against terror. The Americans, till such time, had a very different view. Today, when you have a Donald Trump sitting in the presidency and making statement after statement, which puts India in a very uncomfortable situation, even though yesterday we have had certain on-record clarifications put out there by the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson. And over the years, with India buying so much of defense, gas equipment from US, the relationship becoming so much more strategically closer, can India rely on the presidency of Donald Trump in this war against terror?
See, this is I think there are several questions in this. One is, can India rely on Donald Trump? Can India rely on anybody? I mean, today, if in the middle of the war in Ukraine, if India calls Putin and says, hello, can you send me those 2 batteries of S-400 that you forgot to send because you're in a war, do you think Putin can send? So can I then say that if Putin is an unreliable person? No. And similarly, Trump is a different kind of president. I think every president, and he's coming into it with 2 wars going on, everybody needs a success. Announcing a ceasefire between 2 nuclear countries in active state of hostilities.
But he wasn't just ad-libbing. He has been reading out prepared statements. The State Department has been claiming so.
And they will continue to claim so. If I cannot even imagine that there is any institution in the world that would go against the president. Certainly the first message sets the tone. And we will have to live with this. You see, there are persons. People matter. The personalities matter. Times matter. My sense is, what was a huge problem for us 20 years ago is no longer that much of a problem. Yes, we have people will read out the Riot Act to say, hello, but you have said on chapter and verse that you do not want a mediation. So what does this mean? By that token, poor Bill Clinton gave up his 4th of July holiday to call it Nawaz Sharif and say get off Kargil. You could say that was mediation.
I mean, even post-Uri, Condoleezza Rice to everybody, I think Condoleezza Rice would be. But it's 2008 or 2016. The calls have constantly been coming in.
No, but that's not when you actively stop a war. But there will still be no. First, Kashmir, as far as India is concerned, is off the table. There is no more Kashmir. That India, no government. This one, its successor is going to put it back on the table. So all that remains is for Pakistan to accept it.
Okay, give me some tea. I know that you meet with very important people in New Delhi. Is New Delhi at this point in time squirmish about really how to deal with President Trump?
No.
Are they sort of not sure of what to do when they're also in the middle of a bilateral trade agreement negotiation? US is an important partner.
US will remain your most important partner. I've seen all this stuff about, oh my God, the Quad is dead. Nonsense. Or that the US, we'll stop trade with the US, we will no longer buy weapons from the US. I mean, excuse me.
But there is a reset happening between US and China. China's also cut down its tariff. Will that affect the Indo-Pacific?
No, it will not affect anything. There is enough and more inside the US, the current Trump administration, that want to decouple from China and will decouple. Whether they go through it through these little alleys and byways, I would say don't focus so much. Of course, we focus because we are news people, but don't focus so. Or there is a bigger picture that is being played out. That bigger picture remains. Whether Trump jumped the gun on the 10th of May or whether he didn't jump, it's not a deal breaker. What he did surprised the whole system, surprised everybody in India, frankly. But it is not a deal breaker. He was, so you absorb. There are diplomatic shocks. Everybody gets diplomatic shocks. You move on. There are ways to get beyond this. And I'm pretty certain that the message has gone very clearly to the US administration that the Indians were most unhappy at the way this had happened. And I also expect that, President Trump has so many things to do. He's just lifted sanctions from Syria.
Yeah, also, by the way, he was in that teleconference call with President Erdogan of Turkey.
Correct.
That India is so upset with right now for all the statements that they have been making.
How can President Trump give up on Turkey? Turkey is a very important NATO member of NATO, not even an ally of NATO. It's a member of NATO. So, what I'm trying to get at is that it's all a question of grays. We don't live in a binary world. You can be friends with Russia, and you'll be friends with America as well. The Americans will say that you are the most consequential relationship of the 21st century, but they will try to do a deal with the Chinese. So it's not, if you just follow the people who he's dealing with in terms of where the trade deals are going, he's going after the Europeans. Sooner or later they will go back. Europe is the biggest support that they have in the Western Hemisphere. America cannot run the Western Hemisphere by itself. So they will find a new mean. It's not a new normal, but you'll find new mean. And ultimately, what are you looking at? You're looking at a world that is changing.
Right.
When the world is changing, things as they say, shit happens.
Pardon
my French,
but it's an important usage here.
The things happen.
Yeah.
You deal with it. Let us say if you were the Prime Minister of Greenland and Trump made that statement, what would you do?
Yeah.
So that everybody deals with, everybody learns to work around. It's not, nobody expects smooth sailing in this world.
We need to realize, you look at the images today, Putin and Trump, they're definitely way, way warmer than, of course, Putin was with the previous US administration. With the Chinese, there is a reset in business ties. With Turkey, as Indrani pointed out, to that important NATO membership. And whether we like it or not, there are these equations. With Saudi, Prime Minister Modi has an excellent relationship with, but Saudi is, of course, hosting President Trump, where the discussions on Syria is happening with a teleconference to Turkey. So just a last question, as in your former avatar as journalist. And today, when you say that there are so many grays happening, it's, the Indian Armed Forces have spoken about Chinese missiles, Turkish drones, clear evidence of the sort of support through weaponry by these countries of Pakistan's action. Despite that, it's not like the Turkish ambassador has been summoned, it's not like the Chinese ambassador has been summoned, the rapprochement has happened with China, Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is going to happen. But while the diplomatic functionalities between government to government are all on, to pull up state media and to block their sites, whether it's a Xinhua, whether it's a CGTN, whether it's a TRT, are you picking up just softer targets, or does it really have an implication?
I would not ban any media anywhere in the world. I do not agree with banning media. If that was the case, we would have banned Al Jazeera a long time back. Frankly, banning media doesn't do anything anywhere. And I, as a as a sort of dyed-in-the-wool journalist, that is literally the last thing I would want in any part of the world. People ban books, people ban media for their own political reasons, not because they want to block. Because in today's day and age, you can't block information.
Yeah, I mean, there's VPN, there's everything to access, even if you withhold information.
That apart. So there are people block it for political reasons. I mean, the Chinese block everything.
My point is that, if you have your bigger grouse is of course with the main countries, then act against them. Just one final question, Indrani.
See, that is something you can say as a citizen to a government. They don't do this,
right.
and that's fair. I mean, every citizen has the right to tell their government that this is really not where you should be going, but that isn't. I mean, even in peacetime, people ban media. People are, I mean, everywhere in the world we are seeing a greater and greater, a sort of a less and less tolerant systems in the world, even in the US. So you are seeing all this, but we are not. We don't have to take a.
Right. So that's sort of an autocratic.
There is a world beyond this.
Right. Just one final question. Do you miss attending the press conferences at midnight? Do you miss your earlier self? You now moved on to the think tank space.
Always and forever.
But even if she's not actively in the press conferences, she's constantly connected with us. And of course, you can continue to read her articles in Times of India and other platforms too. Thank you so much, Indrani.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you very much. You brought back so much.
Thank you so much for joining in this conversation too. And if you like the channel, do subscribe. Press the bell icon notification so that you can get alert when I upload new content. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.